Hey folks, BlackCross here, and welcome back to the PlayStation 2 Legacy bonus content, where I discuss various topics that is related to or talking about in regards to the PlayStation 2 itself. And while this topic may not be on the related subject with the PlayStation 2, it will actually at some point in time. Now, regardless if you want to admit it or not, the PlayStation 2 is in fact a retro console. I don't care what anyone says, the fact that it's been out of production for practically 10 years, I believe it's been now, it should be expected that it is now considered a retro console. In my personal opinion, as a retro console it is anything that has not been further developed or continued production line as of its original, I'm trying to think of the word to use here, the original end date of production. So like, say for example, the Wii U is a perfect example of a retro console. The PlayStation 3 is also considered a retro console as well, so on and so forth. So anything that has stopped production has entered in that realm of retro consoles. Now, regardless of what people might want to say or believe, if the system has continued production, that's different. But if the system itself has ceased production, then it is considered retro. So anyway, the point of this question isn't so much talking about the description of retro, it is actually talking about the discussion of emulating. Yes, emulation for video games. I have seen this topic come up on Twitter multiple times, a lot more often than it should, and I've actually seen a number of levels in regards to the discussion itself. Like, there are some people who say emulation is practically pirating, you're stealing from the original creators themselves, you should do your due diligence and pay to have the ability to play these games and stuff. And on the one notion, I would agree. I would agree that if you are physically able to purchase these games, then you should. However, though, that question aside, unfortunately does not relate in regards to retro video games. Now, here's something that I'm going to say right now. If you are unable to get said game, whether it be through digital manufacturer like, say, Nintendo, Sony, or Microsoft themselves, and if you are not able to buy it physically, being that of a retail store or a mom and pop shop, pawn shop, or whatever, then that alone is okay. You should be able to allow emulation regardless of that nature, because even though it is not heavily talked about right now, we will at some point in time see PlayStation 2 games enter into the limelight of, say, these WATA games. Now, if you're not familiar with the setup, WATA game is basically where they encapsulate a game into this plastic holding that can never be broken apart, practically, from what I've heard. It can never be broken apart. And basically it is given a graded rating. And that graded rating basically increases its overall value. So basically you can take a broken up piece of PlayStation 1 game, and it can be graded. It could be graded as like 3 point something, but its value will have already dramatically have increased by tenfold practically. And this practice does not make sense. I was actually hoping that this practice would never come into fruition in video game culture, but sadly it has. It's more common actually on the Nintendo side of things than it is on like Sony's platform and stuff, but it will eventually get there in due time. And I don't doubt in my mind that the PlayStation 2 will eventually hit that market as well. We're right now just seeing mostly like N64 and PS1s and stuff of that nature, but we will eventually, maybe not within 5 years, but probably within 10 or 15 years from now, we will start to see WATA game ratings for PlayStation 2 games, GameCube games, and even Xbox games for that matter. And so, with that being said, these prices are going to skyrocket. In fact, COVID alone has actually increased retro game marketing in an exponential level that we have never seen. Like, I know that I might be slightly exaggerate in some degree, But there are some games where you could normally get them for like 50, 60 bucks at a retro game shop, and they somehow miraculously just all of a sudden made it past the $100 mark. Like, for the record, I don't keep track with the market as often, you know. I just think to myself, you know, hey, I remember this game being priced as like, say, 80 bucks. How come it's 120? You know, it's just, that's what it was. You know, it's like, I remember it being at one price, but then all of a sudden, like, it felt like a week, but really it's probably been like a year. And all of a sudden it went up in price. So it's like, it didn't make sense to me at the time. So it's one of those things where we're starting to see that. It's starting to come up to that point of where, no one wants to sell their copy because, number one, you can't get it anywhere else anymore. So if you do sell it, you won't be able to get it back ever again. And if you do get it back, you're going to get it back by spending a lot more than what you sold it for, probably. But also, too, secondly of all, with Sony, and even Nintendo's guilty for this. Nintendo is equally guilty for this, where they do not release a digital version of these previously known titles. And it's like, if they would just do that, this wouldn't be a problem. This would not be an issue that I think we would have to consolidate with. You know, it's like, hey, why are you pirating these games? Well, you can't get them anywhere else. You know, it's like, do you really want to spend $100, or for that matter, $500 on one game? I think the answer is clear. The answer is no, probably not. Unless you have that expendable income that you do not mind spending on, which, if you're watching this video, chances are some of you don't have that money. I know I don't. Then emulation shouldn't be an issue. Emulation is more of an extension of being able to experience these games in a way that you would normally not be able to experience them, because of the fact that funding is one thing and then remotely finding it is another story. I still remember whenever I was looking for Blood Would Tell, which is actually, I'm only saying this because it's technically true. In terms of my game collection that I have, Blood Would Tell is the most expensive game that I actually have in my PlayStation 2 library. The second ranked highest price is actually Robotic Alchemic Drive. But even I can say for a fact that they're not exactly worth over $100. It was worth it just to experience it, but they're not worth it in terms of the overall value and pricing. So it's like, it makes sense for me whenever I say the phrase, it's worth it as a game, but it's not worth it for the price. Now, even though Blood Would Tell is, in terms of my collection, the most expensive game that I have owned, there are actually other games that are more expensive out there. The most expensive one in terms of the PlayStation 2 game itself is Rule of Rose. The only thing that I know of in terms of what this game is, and that's only because I remember seeing like promotional stuff for this game. I don't know much about it. But what I do know, it would involve these girls in like this haunted manor or something like that. It's a horror survivor game, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. But it's not a horror survivor like zombies or stuff like that. It's horror survivor as in like, it's more of nightmare fuel, if you will. So that's all I know in terms of what the game is, but that game alone, if you were to look up on eBay, is literally right above $800 at its minimum price. In other words, if you were just getting the disc alone, you would probably be paying upwards close to $800. But if you want to get the full case and everything like that, I would not doubt in my mind that it's already peaked up at like $900 or something. So that is like, in terms of what I know in terms of record of most expensive PS2 game, that is the most expensive PS2 game overall. I'm pretty sure that in terms of like international wise, it's probably not the most expensive, but in terms of America release alone, it is actually the most expensive game to try to get your hands on for a PS2. And there are other games alongside it. There are games that are ranked within the $100 price range. And these are games that either A, you probably won't be able to get because you won't see them in your mom and pop retro shops. Or you just don't have that type of money to spend on a $100 game. Now, record, some people would argue and say, well, PS5 games are now $70, so why wouldn't you want to spend an extra $30 on a retro game and stuff like that? That's different. That's a different subject entirely. You know, we're talking about games that's been released for upwards to 20 years now. So it's like, shouldn't it be up to a company that previously owned these titles, have the ability to where they can digitally make them available for people to remotely download them and play them and stuff? Because if they were digitally available, I guarantee you the prices would not be as skyrocketedly bad, but people wouldn't have nearly as much of a problem being able to play these games, because by that point, the price isn't even as dramatically painful. It's easy to get to them because, you know, they're like either $10, $15 a piece, and they're available to download right now. So for me personally, whenever I say the phrase, it is okay to emulate games, it is only because of the fact that, yes, there are no other ways except for spending more money than you should. You know, it's like, it's one thing if you have the expendable income, and if your overall goal is to get every physical copy of a game for that particular system segment and stuff like that, that's one thing, but that's if you have the expendable income. Chances are, you probably don't even have that type of money. Like I said, Rule of Rose is the most expensive PS2 game, and it's $800, which you could easily buy either 8 $100 PS2 games, or you could buy upwards to, I want to say upwards to like 25 or so that are like under $100. So it's like, the value is different for every person. And so if you just wanted to experience the game, that price is not worth it in my personal opinion. But if you are a collector and you are collecting for that library and stuff like that, that might factor in differently. But if you're just wanting to experience the game, if you wanted to see what the game was like, you know, and just play it and stuff, it would not be worth it in my personal opinion. Which is also another thing that I wanted to mention in this series as well, because technically at some point in time we will get to a point in the series where we will be talking about these overly expensive games like Rule of Rose and stuff, because yeah, how else am I going to play it? I'm not going to have that type of money unless, which probably will never happen in this channel, if somebody was like to say, hey, I actually have a copy of this, I can let you borrow it for an episode and stuff like that. Again, that would be awesome, but I'm not going to expect that to happen because, number one, why would you entrust me with an $800 game? That's crazy. That's cool, but that's crazy nonetheless. But I would actually more or less go for emulating these games, because personally for me, it makes perfect sense to emulate these games. Why would I want to spend $800 on a single game just to experience it? You know what I mean? And chances are, and the weird thing too is that for the most part, they're kind of like horror survivors. Like Rule of Rose is one, Haunted Ground is another expensive one, and then I believe the third one is like Siren or something like that. But they're all horror survivors, which is weird. And I mean, aside for Fatal Frame, I'm not much of a horror survivor freak, so it's like, yeah, why would I want to pay $800 just to get the living shit scared out of me? You know, it's that level. But at some point in time during the PlayStation 2 Legacy series, we will eventually dive into emulating games and me playing through these games. Because again, some of these games I probably will never be able to play in my entire life because of how overly priced they are. So there's that. But if Sony was to ever come out all of a sudden, just turn a new leaf and say the phrase, hey, you know, all these great retro titles that you're probably going to have to spend millions of dollars just to get a complete collection or something like that? Well, what if we told you that you can get these games for $15 a piece, but digitally download them onto the PS5 and stuff? That would be very cool and just downright unbelievably impressive that they would actually finally do something like this. But the way Sony has been for the past few years, I don't see that happening. In fact, with the PlayStation 3 and the PlayStation 4, they released PlayStation 2 titles, but then they stop after 10 or so games, and then it's like, where's the rest? Why'd you stop at them? You know, And what's even weirder too is because I've noticed it as well. Originally they had a category for PlayStation 2 games, PlayStation 1 as well, you know, PlayStation Classics. They had a category that you can click on and will pull up all the games for like PS1 and PS2. They got rid of it. Now, record, you can still download these games. You just gotta find them. But they got rid of that option, so it's like, it's no longer there. And it doesn't make sense as to why Sony would do this. And apparently, it's just that they have no interest in it. So anyway, guys, I just wanted to bring you my overall thoughts and opinions in regards to emulating. Let me know in the comments below, what are your opinions on this subject? I know I'm going to get a vastly different answer for every single comment. But personally for me, I find no problem with emulating unless you're doing like an official event of some kind, like for example, games done quick or whatever. That makes sense. You know, you would want the original disc version rather than emulating it and stuff like that. But if you're just doing it for the sake of fun and entertainment and you're just wanting to experience the game finally and stuff like that, to me, there should be no problem with it. So it's like, it differs for every person. So it's like, yeah, emulate away in my personal opinion. So anyway, guys, thank you so much. See you in the next video. Catch you guys later.